If the world chooses to abandon us, then perhaps it is better we all perish.
Here is a question I want you to sit with. If two men make a deal, sign it, shake hands, and both go home, and then the deal collapses within weeks, killing millions of people as a result, who do you blame? Because that is exactly what the Aburi Accord forces you to ask. And Nigerians have been arguing about it for nearly 60 years. Families, academics, politicians, two entire sides of a country. Recently, a 91-year-old general released an 859-page book saying, "Don't look at me, he's the one who killed it." That man is Yakubu Gowon. The man he's blaming is Ojukwu. Ojukwu had been dead since 2011. He cannot respond. But the tapes can, the transcripts can, the historical record can. That is what we are getting into today.
The East is at the crossroads. Since our last meeting, everything possible has been done by the enemies of the East to escalate the crisis in an attempt to bring about the collapse of this region. They have failed and will continue to fail.
Let's start with context because this matters. By late 1966, Nigeria had experienced two military coups and some of the worst ethnic violence in African history. In January, mostly Igbo officers overthrew the government. To many in the north, it looked like an Igbo power grab. Then in July, the counter-coup, northern officers struck back, killed the head of state, and violence spilled out of the barracks into the streets. At least 30,000 Igbo civilians were killed in the north. Over 1 million fled south to eastern region with nothing, traumatized, furious, demanding protection. Ojukwu inherits this as a military governor of the East. Gowon inherits it as the new federal head of state, a role, by the way, that Ojukwu publicly rejected. He argued a more senior officer should have taken power. So before these men ever sat down together, there was already a legitimacy problem between them. That is the weight they brought to Ghana. January 4th and 5th, 1967, Aburi, Ghana. Ojukwu refused to come to Lagos or the north. His safety, he said, could not be guaranteed. So Ghana's leader, General Ankara, offered neutral ground. And here's the thing that makes the Aburi Accord so frustrating to analyze. The meeting actually worked. After 2 days, both sides left with concrete written agreements on record. So, what did they actually agree? Not the spin, the documents. 1. No more force, no violence, no importing weapons. You talk it out. 2. The big one. Power sharing. The Supreme Military Council, which includes all regional governors, holds collective authority. Major decisions require unanimous agreement. No single leader, no federal government can override a region unilaterally. 3. The army restructures into regional area commands under each governor's control. For the East, old soldiers had been killed by their colleagues in the coup. This was real, tangible security. 4. A new revenue formula. Regions keep more of what they produce. Both men signed, both men left. And Ojukwu, by multiple accounts, went back to Enugu and celebrated. He believed the war was over. That celebration is important. It's very hard to square with Gowon's claim that Ojukwu came to Aburi with succession already decided. Here's where it gets genuinely painful. Gowon returns to Lagos. The permanent secretaries, senior civil servants who run the machinery of government, review what was agreed, and they are horrified. One of them, Prince Solomon Akinzwa, writes a memo with a stark conclusion. What was agreed in Aburi amounts to a confederation. The federal government has signed away its authority. British diplomats were reportedly raising similar alarms. Britain had enormous oil interests in the eastern region, and the loose confederation with regional resource control did not suit those interests at all. So Gowon, also dealing with an illness that prevented him from making a quick public counter statement, finds himself being told from every direction, "You gave too much away." He goes back to the drawing board, and what emerges? is Decree number 8. Gowon's book says, Decree 8 was generous, that it completely decentralized the government and went further than the Republican Constitution. But the decree contained 2 clauses that empowered the Supreme Military Council to declare a state of emergency if Gowon and just 3 governors agreed. The guarantee of unanimity, the very core of Aburi, was gone, and it contained a no succession clause. The moment Ojukwu saw it, he rejected it outright. Then Ojukwu does something that is either radical transparency or political warfare, depending on where you stand. He goes on Eastern Nigeria radio and says, "You want to know what was agreed at Aburi? Fine, listen." He plays the tapes live on air, then presses them onto gramophone records, prints and publishes the full transcripts. That is not the move of a man who has something to hide. And it puts Gowon in an impossible position because the tapes say what they say. Here's what I think is actually going on, and this is where it gets analytical. Aburi didn't fail because of one man's bad faith. It failed because of a structural problem neither man had the power to fully solve, surrounded by institutions with their own interests to protect. The permanent secretaries had spent careers building a centralized state. Aburi threatened everything they had built. The British had commercial stakes in keeping that center strong. And in the East, a traumatized population increasingly believed no agreement with Lagos could ever truly guarantee their safety. Gowon was 32. He had never planned to be head of state. He sat across from a more experienced, more strategically prepared opponent and signed something his own government then told him he could not implement. That is not villainy. That's a young man in over his head, being pulled in a direction the Aburi Agreement had just closed off. Ojukwu was operating under the full weight of Igbo grief and fear. When the one agreement he believed could protect his people was quietly dismantled, the tapes and the transcripts were his last diplomatic card. After Aburi was gone, the only card left was Biafra. The war that followed killed between 1 and 3 million people, most of them Igbo civilians. These numbers alone should make us think carefully about how casually we are assembling. And here's the part that should bother all of us in 2026. The question Aburi was trying to answer: how do you hold a vast, ethnically complex country together without any one group feeling permanently dominated, was never resolved. The debate today about restructuring through federalism, resource control, the political marginalization of the Southeast, that is the same argument, just with different faces around the table. Gowon's book doesn't resolve it. A 91-year-old general writing 859 pages to relitigate a 60-year-old deal is not a man at peace with the historical record. It is a man who knows what that record says and is still at the end of his life trying to change the verdict. So let me throw this back to you. When you look at the Aburi Accord, the tapes, the transcripts, the 40 points of deviation in Decree 8, and now a new 859-page autobiography, how do you read it? Was this a deal that was always going to fail? Gowon's failure of knife, Ojukwu's impossible position, or something bigger than both of them? A machine that neither man could ultimately control. No right answer. I genuinely want to know how you think about this. Drop it in the comments. And if you are new here, please subscribe. We do exactly this kind of breakdown every once in a while. African politics, history, leadership, no sugarcoating, no tribal sentiment, just the record. And that is what it means. So, see you in the next one.